Hello, good evening everyone. My name is Ellen Shepherd. I work at the Russell-Cotes Art Gallery and Museum. So I'd like to welcome you all to our In Conversation discussing women in art. As well as working at the museum, I'm actually also a professional painter, so I have a kind of invested interest in this subject. But I'm going to introduce our panellists for this evening. So we've got Helena Baldi, who is our exhibitions programmer, and she's been part of our Lucy Kemp-Welch exhibition. We have Vivian Miller, who is assistant curator from Pallant House Gallery in Chichester. And we have Gill, who is an art historian and biographer. Violet McLean, who is the curator of the gallery at Arts University Bournemouth. Jo Dyson, who is our gallerist coming from Hatch Gallery in Christchurch. And Ineke van der Wal, who is a contemporary artist and arts practitioner. So I just think it's quite an interesting conversation to be having at the Russell-Cotes Art Gallery and Museum, because we have quite an unusually high amount of women artists' works here. So Merton Russell-Cotes collected a lot of works because he was an avid collector, but although there's an element of the female artist's works being cheaper than the male artist, he was also quite an interesting character. He broke a lot of the rules. He didn't sort of live by the kind of conventions of Victorian times. And he actually started collecting Lucy Kemp-Welch's work when she was sort of first starting out. So we're going to kick it off with Helen, who's going to have just talk about Lucy Kemp-Welch and our current exhibition.
Yes, so as I mentioned, Lucy Kemp-Welch is one of our founding Russell-Cotes work. He knew her, and when the opportunity came to develop and curate and very soon tour this exhibition, we were absolutely delighted. It's the first major retrospective of Lucy Kemp-Welch since her death. And really kind of one of the main aims of the exhibition was to really ensure that her name and her work is getting recognised, because although during her lifetime, well, during the early and middle part of her career, she was probably, I'd say, one of the most well-known female artists. By the time of her death, she pretty much faded into obscurity. For those of you that start saying that may not be that way of her work, she was born in Bournemouth to a wealthy middle-class family. Her father was a solicitor. From a very early age, Lucy shows a great talent for art, actually, a love of horses. Both her and her younger sister, Edith, were educated at home. It was actually their mother who taught both of the girls to draw, and her father and her mother, for both of the girls, were, I guess, initially very keen for the girls to have a sort of genteel education. So their father would take them out to the New Forest, where they would study and draw on plein air, and then when they came back, apparently their mother had a fun game where they had to sort of draw what they'd seen from memory. So I guess almost, perhaps unwittingly, I think both of her parents sort of imbued in Lucy particularly skills that I think was so recognisable in her artwork. So this sort of minute attention to detail, I think almost photographic memory, so she never drew from photographs, it was also studies, and also her use of light and colour. But yes, I think once Lucy started to perhaps suggest that art would become a career for her, or a future career path, perhaps this is where her father's support started to wane, and it was her mother who had to carry on sort of propelling her daughter forward. So she arranged for her 16th birthday present, I think, for Lucy to be able to go to Christchurch Animal Infirmary, where she could study horses, even the anatomy of horses, and she did get Lucy some ad hoc drawing lessons with 2 local artists, but that was pretty much the extent of Lucy's artistic training. That is until her father dies, when Lucy is only, I think she's in her sort of late teens, and this, I suggest, gives Lucy the sort of financial and emotional independence to be able to apply to the Herndon School of Art in Bushy, where I guess she would still be considered quite it's one of the lucky key in the fact that she was now able to access, rigorous academic training rather than sort of, as we've been about, the sketching of flora and fauna that perhaps some other contemporary female art students would have wanted. And at the Herkimer School of Art, she completely excelled. So usually here, it helps, and some of you might be able to see, is Gypsy Horse Strokes, that's in the exhibition, you can maybe see it afterwards, as the first piece of work that she submits to Herkimer for the crit session, so this is anonymous. Those of you that can't see it, it's sort of 6 feet long, and it's sort of horses being driven to Barnet Fair. And when Herkimer sees it, he's absolutely astonished by it, and I think it's particularly as astonished that it's by a female student, a student, I guess, because of the subject matter, the size, and I imagine probably the skill that it was by his male students. But he supports her to submit it to the Royal Academy, where it's duly accepted in that date. And she becomes almost an overnight sensation, so it's hung on the line, she was able to sell both the painting and the copyright, and obviously as a young, she's got 21, I think, early 20s, this is beyond, I guess, her wildest dreams. She's able to carry on this upward trajectory, so then 2 years later she submits Confronting in the New Forest, and again this is a sensation, so it's a tiny little picture, it's actually at the National Horse Racing Museum, again it's huge, and it's kind of got this cinematic quality of these horses rearing out at the viewer. So as I said, it's a sensation, smash hit, she becomes a celebrity, it's purchased by the charitable request, which later the tape, so it becomes only the third work by a female artist to be in public hands. And I think it's assumed by this point that by the public and the art critics that she would become only the third member, the third Academy of the Royal Academy. So she's sort of on the cusp of greatness. She talks actually about the fact that William Frick comes to have a look at the painting on Varnishing Day, and he has one look at it and just says something. And then proceeds to tell her how recently the academicians feel that they sort of have a lucky escape because Lady Elizabeth Butler, narrowly missed out on becoming a Royal Academician by 2 votes, and so they're all grateful that she wasn't it. But I think at this point Lucy is expecting, she's still at the early stage of her career, and that she's really going to be able to break down these doors, and despite the fact that between then and I think 1930 she successfully submits to the Royal Academy every year, she's never sadly even considered as an academy. She puts her name forward on multiple occasions, and each time she's rejected, as you can imagine, by a male artist. This is obviously one of the many times that she encounters gender discrimination. During the First World War, she passionately submits proposals to become an official war artist. I think obviously my favourite, the one I was perhaps most shocked by, she applies to the Red Cross to see if she can be sent out to France, to the cavalry out there. She brings her portfolio, and instead of having the meeting that she's expecting, apparently they ask her to spend the day filing and going on a bad course. And perhaps it isn't surprising, I think in 1917 when the Canada government, Canada asks for an equine artist to be their official war artist, despite Lucy's name being put forward, I think actually Alfred Munnings, her younger male friend and contemporary.
We've got a Munnings
yes,
so sort of,
and I'll
looking at it from afar.
Your personal judgment as to whether you think is the more competent artist. But ultimately he gets sent to France. He's working there as a civilian, so he doesn't have to have any military rank, or is given a military rank. He's working behind the lines, in relative comfort and security, so this would have been, a job that Lucy would have been, perfectly capable, more than capable of doing, and he gets a job and seems to be a bit of a turning point in their careers, in the fact that from then on very shortly, Mannings is elected as an associate and a full member of the Royal Academy, and obviously later on goes on to become president.
And he's knighted as well.
He has his own museum, whereas Lucy, because of the subject matter she's also working on, is now becoming obsolete, so the working horses that she loves are now being replaced by machinery.
Because it's the development of cars then, isn't it? So the horses don't take such a prominent place in society.
Outside, a window literally is now living there. But ultimately, but as I say, despite reaching these career highs by her death, she gets a few big mentions, I think, in newspapers, but ultimately, pretty much her life's work is only rescued by David Messon before the Barry program is married to Clarke the next day. So he just buys it as a job lot because it's not really chucked in the bin, and it just, yes.
Yeah, it's weird that, Mannings is the kind of the one that is really remembered, because when she was being exhibited at the Royal Academy, she was really doing quite well, and she was quite famous within her circles. But actually, when I don't know, in terms of the history books, maybe sort of talk about that in a bit, but when you think of the horse painter from that time period, it is Mannings that is always the one that is brought up because of the kind of acclaim, the prestigious awards, and kind of, I guess, the opportunities that he had that Lucy wasn't able to have in the same way. I think she went to be a war artist, just looking at the way that she captures movement, the gesture of the horses, and I think it would have been, amazing for her career. But obviously she wasn't given that sort of same opportunity, was she?
No, I said that's the beginning.
But she didn't want to be known as a women artist, did she?
No, so it's quite, I think, really surprising considering the obvious discrimination she faced. She was very clear in journal articles that I've read of hers, that she says, and we've got, I did actually write it down, we've got a letter in our archive. Our curator wrote to her to ask her if she wanted to submit work, so in the 1940s, I think it is, to submit work in our Women Artists exhibition, and she wrote back, I've always been of the opinion that the discrimination of sex is absurd in such matter as art, and merely means to claim for indulgence on that head. And then I think quite carefully she adds, I wonder if you see my point. So perhaps she did, and then in another article, perhaps more succinctly, she journaled to a journalist, she said, I think it's really too bad that in art men and women should be separated. Surely art should be considered separate. So despite the fact that she was, clearly discriminated, ultimately she just felt that she should be judged by her art alone.
Yeah.
Which obviously wasn't.
Experience how artists
I don't
know, I guess it depends the way you look at it. So when she just wants to be respected for the amount of effort that she puts into her practice. She just kind of wants to have all the opportunities that all the other artists were having at the same time. So it's kind of, I guess it may not seem very feminist looking at it now, but maybe at the time she was just looking to be an artist. She didn't necessarily want her work to be judged, in a different way.
Well, I think it is really feminist actually. I think it's one of those things where we're sort of segregating women out now with events and with exhibitions. So actually come full circle and kind of really need to not recognise women artists because women, there's no need to. I mean, the idea of actresses being called actresses rather than actors. I mean, actors now coming as the word that people will use for women actors, right? And I think that will happen with art professionals as well. I mean, you won't have that separation, you will come full circle.
Well, I think until you get to that stage, sometimes there isn't a need to name things and actually to be out there for whatever position it is that you're taking. In an ideal world, you really shouldn't need that, but I don't think we're there yet, and I think that building on the points that have been taken, it's not unusual looking at the 20th century British artists is my field, so I'm sorry if someone's expecting other centuries. But it's not uncommon what you're saying about that, wanting to be seen as an artist, but yet there's still that tension there in terms of where your work gets shown, who supports you, what gallery you show in, all those things that are sometimes barriers for women, and indeed can be for others as well.
But it's an interesting point, you say actor, actresses, but artist is gender neutral. So that's like a consideration. So when you think of that, it should always be seen as an artist, not who's behind the paintbrush. And that's very important.
Can I ask a question? Just to be recognised by the Royal Academy, surely it's better than just to submit something and they don't know who's done it.
Well, that's an interesting point that can be beautifully illustrated by this painting here. So this is by Louisa Starr, Kenzani, this one. And yes, so for the Royal Academy schools, female artists were not allowed. So for her submission, she did exactly that. So she just submitted it as L Star and was duly admitted. And then once her gender became revealed, suddenly this offer was rescinded. So she picked up such a fuss that was, we're going to accept her, even though they're not. So they had to backtrack, but they only did that by then having to have an additional, I suppose, five female artists under the proviso that then they did all attend, but they all basically had to chaperone each other and just go around as one sort of group.
One woman. That was about 1860, wasn't it?
Yeah, so
yes, in background research, one of the first female artists were allowed into art schools. So it was education like
Can I just pick up on one point of the war artist story that she wants to do? I was really struck by a painting she did of the Boer War in 1904 or whatever. I find it enlightening, the elegance of the subject matter. You know, it's so evocative, yet the comment by her male tutor was, well, Lucy, I think you better stick to working in observation in nature. And I think at that point, if she continued to do, to do more of that work or continue to explore that subject matter or something that moved her in that style, I think it would have been interesting. And it made me quite sad to say that she had that comment saying, oh, we don't do that because I think we're better at painting from nature.
I think as well that really raises interesting questions about the notion of gatekeepers who actually hold that power and the difficulty of sometimes getting through those doors, and whether you sort of toe the door or whether you barge that door down, and then there's that sort of tension there. I think the point was made also about opportunities.
Yes.
And you can see that sometimes in terms of your tutors denying those opportunities then to upskill or whatever. So there's things around that, I think, in terms of who does all that.
But also in that time period, it's that class as well, not everyone has education. So there's a particular class, so there's a lot going on around that time, but it's not just about females, but it's about privileges as well. So
That's what I was thinking about in terms of, if you wanted to be an artist, Lucy obviously had influence from her mother being quite, open-minded rather than her father, but it's kind of,
she's a middle class.
she has a certain amount of money to be able to kind of explore it, but also I guess, thinking about other women artists, and maybe that's, different to things like Gwen John, but also, if you had a husband who was an artist, then there could be an element of support there. But actually, you were still probably classified as being what? Oh, really? No, not so much.
So, sorry, those are not even.
No, that's fine.
I'm just thinking of some artistic couples where women's work has really been sort of sidelined and there's been real issues between the two couples. You look at some of yes, I mean, there's a number of them where they've destroyed work.
Wow. Exactly. That was a classic relationship. Husband and wife. And he was, he limited like painting hours, he destroyed a lot of GK's early work, really shocking. And yet he's the best known artist now, the two of them still. It really is shocking.
But it's also been the other way around. There have been artist couples where the husband, who sometimes, or a partner, male partner, or not male partner, has been incredibly supportive of the practitioner, and has, I can't remember who, I think it was British painters, I think, this was 1600s.
Very big.
Yes, and he had an accurate record, obviously for financial purposes, of all the transactions, sales and commissions, etc.
So
that documentation is valuable. Paul Baker and Victor William, he was very supportive. But then you've got Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock, and Lee Krasner was the predominant artist who introduced Pollock to lots of other artists, and he said, thanks very much, dear. And now we remember until recently as Pollock's.
Well, yeah, that's
So it's
the
a
wife
very
of,
sensitive
or
balance.
partner of, and then brackets also an artist. It's that kind of idea of, the wife or the mother title comes first, and then artist second. And, I think that's kind of what I was going to ask about when John, in a way, she sort of, versus John potentially was the kind of more famous one, but obviously a brother, but maybe, or even Gill, like how, women artists have been written about, and just sort of.
It's interesting because I think throughout this, just going back quickly to Mary Beale. So I don't know who knows much about Mary. A few shaky heads. So Mary Beale is a 17th century artist, and she was buried in St James's Church actually, in Piccadilly in London, and she was the breadwinner of the family. So I think actually you have to think that just because women didn't have opportunities, in the 19th century or 20th century, that actually looking back, you do have women who sort of go above and beyond what they're expected to do. But Mary Beale was the breadwinner of her family. She had a whole artist studio around her. She was a portraitist, and her husband, Charles Beale, who was also a painter, decided that actually his wife was much better at portraits, everything really, and said actually no, you take on the business. And he would test drying times for her for oil paintings. He'd work on different pigments, all these things to make her life easier. All the accounts, as we've already heard about as well. And he would do all those things for her. And both of her sons were part of her business as well. So the sons would paint the drapery, the backgrounds of her works, and it would be Mary who would be there making faces and hands, which is the most important part of the portrait. And she was hugely recognised in her lifetime. And yet, her plaque and memorial at St James's Church was destroyed in the Second World War, and was only recently sort of reinstated. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
So that kind of, that her life story has kind of been lost.
It
and,
has.
People aren't as aware. If you ask me if anyone knows who she is, and we don't. But is that because it wasn't documented, do you think? Or?
No, I mean, it is documented. Her works in major collections across the country. You've got her amazing portraits and I'm not really sure what it is. I sometimes wonder if it comes down to schools, to be honest, and school education. And I think actually, if you're not constantly educating young people in terms of who these artists are, then you're never going to get to know them. Like, it's almost like we have to keep a bit of groundwork, isn't it? We keep reliving the same bits of history where we're not actually continuously learning about these interesting women artists.
I think there are lots of Victorian, there are lots of artists working in 15 and 1600s right across Europe who travelled, who had assistants, established studios. And I think it was possibly towards Victorian, towards the end of the 1800s, that so many were forgotten. And it's only now, from my own perspective, I discovered a lot in the early 90s because lots of publications came out on various, starting that's probably earlier, like Jimmy Oscar and Rose Goward, loads of it, and I think it did push a lot of attention back to those artists and also the influence on contemporary both women and female and male artists.
And I think that's happening quite a lot at the moment. There seems to be a lot more kind of publications that are coming out. And I think about kind of Katie Hessel's story about Without Men, which kind of thing goes back to kind of 13th century, 14th century. So it's kind of that idea of uncovering artists from through history where they kind of not been recorded, or maybe they have, but we're not as aware of it.
I was just going to say, I did in the 80s in the art history degree, 86, and came out thinking there weren't any women artists. We didn't discuss them, we didn't study them. We studied women as a subject, but not any artists. So when you're young, you don't have consciousness into your role to go and search and discover. So, yeah, it's just tricky.
And just one other thing that's striking, picking up what you were saying as well, is that we've been talking largely, I think, so far about painting. We haven't actually talked about the other arts, the sculpture, the craft, all the ways sometimes how these things, certainly in the past, have been differently valued.
Yeah, because I was thinking about how women would use pseudonyms for to become authors. So there's ways of kind of like bending the rules to kind of reach these sort of spaces that are a bit sort of unattainable. Yeah, there's lots of different kind of creative paths that are they are getting easier to get into, but there was obviously a certain amount of time where it was really quite challenging.
I think in the 60s it's kind of started giving women more voices, because obviously up to the 50s it's about debutante being presented, women had a place. There's a classic film called Mona Lisa's Smile with Julia Roberts, and I don't know if people know that. Yeah, it is kind of cheesy, but it was quite nice to kind of contextualise what women's roles were in the 50s, and obviously you had the 60s kind of turning around with the millionaire front, kind of breaking out from the silhouette of the stereotype of how women was expected to act. So I think in the 60s, yes, women's history was happening, but it wasn't talked about, it wasn't allowed to. You had a place in the home. I think reading about some of the things you're saying about the woman domestic woman who wrote about, who spoke about, wrote about. So it's only platforms and opportunities from the 50s where the voices and discussions can take place, because there was a suppressed part of
But
it.
a lot of female artists actually started in the 60s and 70s because they were working from home and they didn't really have a platform. So performance art and environmental art and textual based work really took off.
Yeah, and
Maybe
maybe
an artist specifically.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's reference to the body and the position of the female body within the larger context.
And that would have been a taboo in the life.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, oh.
So what, like Annie Ondetto, how could she, in relation to the Carl Andre, and she was so outspoken that she died a mysterious death.
But you see the women in art as muses. They are in art, but they're used as a subject of muse. But then after the 50s, then the women started to kind of step forward. People had to take little steps. As you said, people disappeared. They had different voices. So it's a very different world.
I mean, the husband of art written by,
But he was
because Dora Maar, she made a comment about Picasso doesn't paint portraits, he doesn't paint me, he just paints himself. The reflection every lot.
I think, maybe we can ask you a little bit about Gwen John and the exhibition, because they were kind of a similar time period to, she lived in a similar time period to Lucy. Just talk a little bit about it. We just segue a little bit, because we've got quite a lot to
So as I said, I come up from Halifax Gallery in Chichester, and not to sort of hijack the exhibition behind us, but we've got a Gwen John exhibition at the moment. And I think we were all really surprised that Gwen actually lived at the same time, and they are contemporaries, aren't they? Lucy Kemp-Welch and Gwen John, which I think we found quite surprising because their work is so different, and yet has sort of some of those similarities in terms of women both trying to make it work as professional artists and everything else. But, our Gwen John exhibition. So Gwen John was born in Wales, she grew up in Tenby, along with 3 siblings, and her mother died when she was quite young, so she died when Gwen John was 8 years old. And because of that, they were sort of neglected children. Their father didn't have a huge amount of parenting to do with them. And Gwen John was just desperate to leave Wales, and she wanted to go and study art somewhere. Her slightly younger brother, Augustus, who does become a more famous artist, and he is the younger sibling, he goes first to the Slade School of Fine Art, which is probably the most progressive art school in the country at the period. And Gwen manages, after a year, to persuade her father to let her also go and study art. So they go off to Slade, and Gwen John studies there from 1895 to 1898, and it's really there where she learns these very early techniques in terms of looking at the body, the human form. She's taught by the most amazing tutor who becomes really quite infamous at the Slade, Henry Tonks, who is a man who he started off as a surgeon and then he becomes a tutor at the Slade.
And he thinks that female artists and women students are by far the most accomplished out of his students. And it's interesting actually, what we sort of talked about in terms of women having those opportunities at art schools and whether or not the 60s was actually that period where that sort of comes out. It's actually not the case in somewhere like the Slade. So in the 1890s, by the time when John is there, the Slade is accepting 2/3 of women students to male students. And everybody who's there thinks that the women students on the whole are more talented than the men. They're given all the same opportunities in terms of getting into the Slade. They have access to the same scholarships. They have all the same classes, but the one thing that differs, which makes the Slade not as progressive as it would be as it is today, obviously, is that women weren't drawing from the life model in full. So they weren't drawing nude figures in their entirety. They're very much the draped figure. And one of the works we've actually got in our Gwen John exhibition is by Ida Nettleship, who is actually Gwen John's sister-in-law. And while she is looking at the Slade, she draws this man who basically it's almost like a nappy that he's wearing, like an enormous pants nappy thing, which is just, and all you can see is that this triangular shape over the slightly delicate bits. And she's almost done it to highlight the fact that she doesn't have that sort of access to the draped nude. Sorry, I'm going to pause a little bit on that. Gwen John spends a little bit of time in London working. She really sort of develops there as an artist, but then goes over to, everyone says Whistler's Academy, which actually isn't correct either. She goes over to Paris with a couple of friends, with Ida Nettleship, her later sister-in-law, and another student called Gwen Salmond. And the 3 women travel to Paris unchaperoned. It's women having a great time in Paris together. And so much so that they actually stay in the first place they get, which is completely unfurnished, and they're absolutely terrified, this apartment building that they've got. And they actually have to push a chair up against the door because they've got their keys from the balcony in the night and it doesn't lock properly. They're really terrified of their own living rental space in Paris. But they go and study these 3 women, and Gwen John ends up going to Carmen Rossi's studio. So Carmen Rossi was J. McNeill Whistler's sort of favourite model, and Whistler is the guest tutor at Carmen Rossi's Academy Carmen. So Gwen John goes to this women-founded art school, but to train with Whistler, and it's then that she discovers all sorts of interesting techniques in terms of colours and the sort of palette that she goes on to develop. She learns how from Whistler actually how to set out a palette in terms of keeping it very clean and working with sort of progressive colours across the palette. But she also comes away from there loving and falling in love with Paris. And I won't go into too much detail, but she basically ends up in Paris in 1904 after doing a walking tour with a friend, Julie McNeill. And they end up in Paris. I think Gwen John doesn't really want to come back after that.
Did she become a life model as well at one
She
point?
did.
And she also worked with Impression, wasn't it?
Rodin.
Yes.
So Gwen John, like a lot of women artists at that period, wasn't really able to, although she was a professional artist, obviously practice art in every minute she could do it. She had to subsidise her income, and she did that by becoming a life model. And it's actually her brother who says, when she gets to Paris, why don't you, if you're struggling with money, why don't you go and bang on the door of the most famous sculptor in the world at this period, who is Auguste Rodin? She says, oh, maybe I will. And Rodin's got 60 women at this period on the books that he can call up at any point to come and model for him. But Gwen John bangs on the door nonetheless. He's interested in her. They actually start a relationship that lasts about 10 years, and she becomes very much his muse for particular works. So she's employed by Rodin, but at the end of the day, if she didn't need to do that work, she probably would have developed more in her own artistic career as well. I mean, it's that interesting, I don't know, that interesting sort of balance that she had to do that sort of work. I mean, she has access to Rodin and Rodin's studio, and she sees him drawing and painting women in a particular way, but then means that she's able to develop her own techniques and her own skill, and look at her own body. She uses female friends who will model for her nude, and so she does develop from sort of meeting these very interesting
artist in Paris, but she still had to subsidise her income, which seems sort of really unfair. And I think just to say actually that one of the things we've got in our exhibition, which has been very controversial with visitors, which I always enjoy. I always enjoy discussions when it comes to slightly controversial works. We've got a very large reproduction of Gwen John life modelling, sitting there with no clothes on, probably in Rodin's studio, and people have had a very different reactions to it. And people have written sort of a couple of quite angry comments saying, why do you do this work? You wouldn't see Rodin naked at the start of an exhibition of his work. But I think the reason why we really felt we had to include this work is that actually she had a completely different side to it as well. She had to subsidise her income as a woman artist. Actually, you have to show things like that. Like, she developed her career and she became such an amazing, such a well-known artist. I mean, we recognise her now as one of the most sort of brilliant modern British artists of the time. And she did that part-time because she had to subsidise her income by doing something else.
Can I just ask, in comparison, so her younger brother, so when she was in Paris, what was he doing at the same time?
So he moves about a little bit. He's in Paris for a period, but he's mainly based in the UK. But he had developed his own practice and stuff, completely separately to Gwen John. They have very different styles of painting. You can again see that in the exhibition. I mean, paintings of people like Julia McNeill, who becomes Augustus John's lifelong muse and later sort of partner. The two artists, two siblings, paint her entirely differently. Like, they're not working in tandem at all. But what's interesting that although Augustus John, for those of you who may not know much about him, he's a bit of a difficult character. I mean, it's not great to his wife. He lives in this sort of menage a trois, which is pretty awful for Ida and mentorship quite early on. And he's not a great character to be honest. And yet he loves his sister, supports her work completely, and says that actually he thinks in history that she will be the one who will be remembered. And I'm completely paraphrasing, but he says, I will be the brother of Gwen John. Gwen John will be that artist who's remembered.
And do you think that's true, or do you think it's actually the other way around? Because there were sort of different people sort of saying different things.
I don't know. I'm not sure if they're more. It's difficult, isn't it? Because I think I have much more interest in Augustus John. Sorry, if we I have much more interest in Gwen John than I do Augustus John. But there's no things as to why he's being remembered. I mean, he lived in Edinburgh for a start. I mean, he lived to 1961, I think it was, and she died in 1939. So he had a wonderful career. His output was absolutely enormous. I mean, Gwen John worked notoriously slowly anyway, plus the fact that she was working.
There's not as many pieces.
There's just not as much out there. But I think now, her work is worth a hell of a lot, and they don't have to want to say. Whereas Augustus John's come up. I mean, I have like alerts on the sale room for various different artists all the time to see who's out there and who's doing what. And Augustus John comes up every week. I mean, people are like, every week by Augustus John. I think because of that, his work isn't as valued. I want to say that then.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was just thinking about kind of your role at Callan, and so obviously you've been part of this exhibition, and just kind of wondering how you're kind of addressing this kind of women artists, and how that comes into your programming, and increasing awareness and kind of education and that sort of thing. Just
so at the moment, I mean, it's actually quite a good timing that I'm here now, because the two exhibitions we've got on to do by John, who's a woman artist, and then alongside that we've got Kay John Key's exhibition, who's a contemporary artist, and it works in sort of a similar way in terms of sort of palette, magic portraits and things. Which has got some similar feeling to her work as Gwen John. So the two main exhibitions Callan has at the moment are very women artists. That's not always the case, of course. I mean, we'd like to mix it up with exhibitions in comparison. But in terms of like programming and exhibitions, I mean, in our permanent collection we have the old house, so the old historic house of Callan House, and within that collection we like to try and hang it as close to 50-50 as we can with women artists. We're not always quite there, but we try our absolute best. And that's to say as well that these aren't the sort of random women artists that we're just sort of picking out of the stores. These are the best of the brightest women doing the most sort of incredible work across the 20th century. But also, I mean, it's interesting, I think, looking at figures from national museums and galleries, and I think it's something that I know we should think a little bit about in our discussion as well, that I mean, Panelling House has got 23% of the collection is made up of women artists, which sounds like incredibly low, to be honest, but compared to some of the national, I mean, the National Gallery have less than 1% women artists on display. The National Portrait Gallery, just prior to their rehab, was about 11%.
And we're just going to say about the rehab.
Yeah, so they've had a big rehab recently, which actually worked on before I was at Panelling House. I've learned from great artists doing a portraiture project with Flavia Gregarian. And it was an amazing project, and they really wanted to get, the discussions that we had behind the scenes about getting 50% women on the walls of the MFG, which particularly for that early period, they wanted to get 47 women on the walls for that early period, looking at, Tudor art. Tudor is it's so difficult to do that, isn't it? But, it's a great project, that's all there. They're essentially but
Yeah, absolutely. We're quite unusual in that sense, aren't we? That we've got quite a lot.
Yes, but then you say that I did actually get our creators to do this. I think for Mercer's Crown collection, it's still, it was 38 women artists he collected out of 300. So but I think for a Victorian collector, that would be high.
yeah, I think it's difficult for art galleries as well, particularly ones that are being founded. Like Russell-Cotes, but Panelling House is much more recent, so we were founded in 1982. But we always like to talk about ourselves as a collection of collections, and people have actually given works en masse to us over the years, starting in 1982 with Walter Hussey, and then people like Kearney, several sort of collectors, male collectors who, they look at their. I think that, whenever you want to collect a piece of art, or you're interested in a piece of art, there's something about it that draws you to it. And I think you actually project your own experiences onto things you like and things that you've got an affinity to certain works. I think because of that, a lot of male collectors end up buying male artists' works. And so we have, a huge collection, and we've got 5,000 works at Panelling House Gallery, and about 3,000 of those are works on paper. And the works that come as these thanks to these larger collections are often male artists' work who come from male collectors. But that being said, it's not open market passion. In terms of what Panelling House is doing to bring that sort of diversity and to try and diversify the collection, we're always looking, forwards in terms of how we're going to fill in the gaps, I guess, in terms of our collection. And thinking about women artists, artists of colour, trying to, I think every museum art gallery is doing that proactively now. Some of the works we've recently applied, and we've got an amazing work here, like Pauline Boaty, who's one of the founders of British Pop Art. Barbara Walker is a very recent one, the most amazing work, which is sort of in relation to a mini art portrait that's at in Gill, or Rachel Jones, who's another amazing contemporary artist. So we're always looking at these sort of interesting ways to bring new works in and to sort of educate the public in amazing, more British and contemporary female artists.
No, I think there's definitely the consensus that a lot of museums in the country have a lot of focus on that at the moment. I think I'm just going to move on, if that's all right. But Gill, you've got an exhibition that you're working on at the moment as well, which is about some women artists. So yeah, okay.
Thanks very much. What I wanted to say a few words about is the exhibition that I've been co-curating at St Barr Museum and Art Gallery in London that some of you may know. It's an exhibition called Parallel Lives, 8 Women Artists. So what this exhibition does is very much to look at the career and experiences of these 8 women artists, whose lives span the 20th century. They were all born within 20 years of each other. And the artists that we've chosen to focus on are Enid Marks, William Barnes-Graham, Evelyn Dunbar, Barbara Jones, Monica Poole, Gertrude Hermes, and Prunella Clough, and Eiffel Cahoon, and I made it through the 8 of them, which was quite a challenge. Some of those I'm sure will be known to you, but also those will be perhaps, and we hope that these are going to be some new names to some of the visitors to the gallery. And they're very much stylistically diverse. Sculpture, printmaker, wood engraving, there's lots of different work and different medium for people to see. And what I think becomes apparent is how within their different fields, whether it's surrealism, printmaking, wood engraving, that at times some of them have been very much at the forefront of their fields. That's not to say that's been without tensions, without challenges, and hence that notion of parallel lies. So what we try to do is to pick up where some of those paths will cross. I mean, we can't do all of that in the exhibition. There's more of that narrative within the book that we produced together. And I should say, I'm working here with Steve Marshall, who I've worked with actually since the first exhibition I did in St Barbara. I think, Sarah, were you there then? No, far too young. Anyway, that was on Evelyn Dunbar, who is one of the artists that we featured, and it was the first exhibition that there was retrospective. Hannah did something later in the older part of the house, but actually St Barbara there first, if I may say.
That's okay.
It's actually
not letting me
great. Absolutely. I think that's important how sort of stories get told and then reproduced. But anyway, so I'll just pick out a couple of those artists just to perhaps allude to some of the points that are of interest about. If I pick Evelyn Dunbar, because she's one I know very well. She was the only salaried woman war artist. She actually had 40 of her paintings accepted by the War Artists Advisory Committee. That's something wrong. I think it was a Nobel committee, yeah. But and that was no easy task because those works had to pass the censor. I mean, she did get one that was rejected, but actually we got it. So if you're interested, come and see a work with Gill, men and women stooping. And it's fascinating that they chose to reject it, yet they took 40 others of her. What's interesting too, hearing about, talking about other war artists, you mentioned Tonks, who did all this facial, recorded all facial surgery in the First World War, quite horrific, but so powerful. There's such important documentary records that we're talking about in some of this work. It's just interesting to see some of that. But Dunbar actually, she was well known before 1940. Her work was acclaimed back in the 30s when she was a student at the Royal College of Art and worked on the Broccoli murals that, if you haven't been to see them in Lewisham, they are so well worth seeing. Rothenstein, who was the principal at the time at the Royal College of Art, described them as being some of the best murals of the 20th century. So, and it's open one of these coming weekends, a friend of ours. So I'll take William Barnes-Graham because I wanted to have a Scottish artist in it, because I think sometimes we tend to forget actually there are other places, other countries out there. So William Barnes-Graham is a really interesting artist in that she, first of all, her father was very anti her going to Edinburgh College of Art. Actually, she was another woman, it was her aunt who enabled them to persuade him that this was going to be an okay career for her. Hugely talented, won loads of prizes. She had poor health, took a long time for her to complete her course. So 1940, war breaks out. She's won a scholarship, delayed taking it up. Her principal was pretty enlightened, she was at Wellington, recommended she go to St Ives because he knew that she had an interest in abstract art. And actually she goes on to be, of the artists of a generation, perhaps one of the best British modernist abstract artists. So she's there mixing with Ben Nicholson, Barbara Hepworth, and others. And her war work was actually, she was making camouflage. Yes. There's some wonderful paintings she did with her. Didn't last long. Sadly, she got dermatitis, and that was the end of that. But nonetheless, she's forging her path there. But what she began to find, particularly post-war, when the young men came back who didn't do more, Sven Berlin, Patrick Heron came back, but he was a conscientious objector. She felt sidelined. Her work would be sort of on the periphery. So it was really quite a struggle for her. But I think the other thing about these women, what struck us was their singular vision sometimes, was that determination to carry on whatever. And you'll see if you come to the exhibition, and I hope you will, how her work becomes more abstract as she goes through her career. But what again is interesting in terms of picking up some of the issues that we've been talking about is recognition for her came late. It didn't come till she was almost in her 70s when she was much older, but there's been a big exhibition that Tate did in 1985 on artists who lives and dies. She gets 3 works shown, Roger Hilton gets 20, and that sort of tells a story. And I think this is where some of these early stories are so important, that we need to sort of remember them, because they do so much help to shape the future and to help our understanding of ways of looking at the world, ways of trying to make sense of it. Because one size just does not fit all. I want to mention Enid Marks. 1944, during the war, she's turned down she wanted to do camouflage work, but she was turned down. Writes a children's book, 5,000 copies of it sold just like that. But 1944 was a really important moment for her because she was made a royal designer for industry. And the citation for that was for her pattern making, the first person ever, because she did wonderful stuff with fabrics. Some of you in the past, if you're my age, you would have sat on underground fabrics that she designed with her repeat patterns. Wonderful. She also was the first woman wood engraver in 1944 to do that. And there are other marks of that. And I could go on probably for each of them telling you something about, but probably I should let.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I'll get carried away.
So interesting. I just want to pick up on the you were saying about determination.
Yes.
And I think, and also this idea of, coming out and saying to your parents, or, I want to be an artist. And I don't know about Inika, but I had that myself, when I was younger, and I said, I want to be an artist, I want to be a painter. And actually, my dad said, no, I think you can do anything else, actually, rather than do that. But, that was more probably about money, than not necessarily about me being a woman and wanting to be an artist. But, maybe, Inika,
I
did
didn't
ask
ask
about
comments there because I think I'm the youngest of a series of siblings. And I still get ridiculous comments like, no, it's not, because most of what I am is in our clinic, and it wasn't quite frowned upon. And my practice started quite early, and I had young children, had a family, so there were loads of opportunities because I had a young family, and that I missed out on. And much later, maybe the oldest one's about 8 or 9, she said, Mummy, why can't you be a teacher or a nurse and do something reasonable? They are really supportive her, but I thought that was very, very interesting, because you do have to fight very hard to get where you want to be. And I also found, because I'm a painter, as for me, I needed to get out of the house. It was something that you couldn't do at home. And I think a lot of women artists then had to take up different art practices because they couldn't do painting. I was very fortunate that I did have a studio outside the house. I really made a point of that. And it's the first one was really the studio, freezing cold with ice and then boiling hot, until I moved to SpaceX Studios, where again, there are 2 women artists and the rest are 8. It was a very dominant, as it was the art college, a very dominant male culture. And I did juggle the 2 of having children and letting go of lots and lots of opportunities, and really very determinedly having to see my own practice. And I was fortunate that I got exhibitions pretty quickly in very well established art galleries, arts, council funded, and first review, coming back to female artists and being all woman artists, making massive canvases that were influenced by German expressionism. It's totally against the grain. Well, not
Well, it's
quite,
quite
but
male dominated
yes,
thing.
I wasn't denying any femininity or nothing. It was just how I thought. In my first review, critical review was either Art Monthly or Arts Review, and the critic noted that A, this was amazing work made by women artists, and B, she was living in the West Country. So, yeah, and a lot of friends thought I could take offence of that, and I thought, brilliant, that's, really sees it, I think I'm really point.
So did you really kind of sort of start out quite quickly from
I did.
Yeah.
I had children. I had my oldest child born by, or conceived by accident, was he born to live like it. It was difficult, it really was quite difficult, but the determination as all women we've discussed here, you just have to continue it. And, there are those occasions that you feel left out. You see other male artists, colleagues who take opportunities and you think, oh, I wish. But now looking back, I attended a dinner party once by people at the art college, because later on I started to guest lecturing. And there was a comment made about 2 artist persons. And I was sitting there, and it was ignored. And they said, well, they really will be very remembered. Do you know what? Nobody can remember them anymore, and I'm still standing. So it's interesting how art history, also in the context of this show, everybody touched upon, everybody here really is practicing what art history remembers, forgets, and rediscovers, and looks again at an artist. And quite frankly, my biggest fear is they're like an antique roadshow. But I'm fortunate, we've got, talking about museums, in 1992, I think, Cambridge University, Newport started the first collection of women artists, which now has run into a massive, massive collection. And obviously I was part of that, and I'm not working there. So it is nice to know in other institutions in the university, it is nice to know that somewhere in the life, some of your work is going to, survive and stay in a good place and can be seen.
And do you think that's sort of it's changed since you first started showing at galleries? And, do you think
probably, when I was at SpaceX, I introduced the idea of having because Southwest, we had, what it's called Southwest Arts, and there's a massive area from sort of Cornwall down to Bath, Avon, not Dorset is separate. And we organised an open exhibition of women artists. Now, how many women artists open exhibitions were there? And usually, this was male artists, maybe 2 women artists. But this one, the flack we got from male artists saying, well, how can you do it women artists only? And I said, of course we can. And it was, it brought women artists, it was critically selected, it brought women artists together, Kansas, since I was right down to beyond Bristol. It was a brilliant show, it got to the television, and it was just something that needed to be done. And you also had Make, I don't know whether you know Make, Women's Artist Library, which is now a Goldsmith. That was also something that, women artists send their slides to. Slides at the time for all of you, possibly. There were slides on click, click, click. And so a record was held by women artists. You submit your slides, and there was another thing that you knew somewhere along the line that things would be safeguarded. But yeah, it was, and I think it's changed now that I find that it is, the male-female section is still, I think it's still very much there. It's better,
I think it is better.
The artist awareness is much better. And of course now we don't have female and male, but we have lots of other different issues around it, which is, it's brilliant. But it is, and coming back to older women artists, you see now, I also make a stand, I don't want to be judged as a female artist, I want to be judged as an artist, full stop. But now I slightly feel more that I want to be judged as a woman artist, because I'm getting older, and I think I want to have that male artists, they sort of, or actresses or actors, whatever, they sort of age mature. sure, like red wine in an oak barrel. Women artists get a lot of criticism, and I'm very aware of the fact that I embody an older women artist, literally, and I think that should also become female artists, and I think that's also something that should be seen and pushed further.
Can I pick up on that? You're saying about being older, but obviously we're talking about art. You also think of females, older females like Vivian Westwood, Sandra Rhodes. So I don't think there's an expiry date on creativity. There shouldn't be. And if we are put in a pigeonhole, that's wrong. We're talking about legacy collections, we're talking about the history of women. One thing they have in common is going to art and finding that place in society and not being judged. But unlike some of the points of race, we shouldn't be judged on gender, I mentioned earlier. It's about legacy, what we're giving back. And also, Joe, you were saying about history, and I was saying, no, art, anything creative is a visual documentation of our history and us. Without it, we are nothing. So some of the legacies and what women and men have done, but we shouldn't be pushed sideways, and we're not, but I think we have to think of other creators, as I said, fashion designers. We're all aging on a fine line, and there should be an expiry date on your practice.
And you think of women photographers as well. Swanage had one of the most famous women photographers at the time, Helen Muspratt, who had a studio in the 1930s in Swanage. Absolutely amazing. I've only just come across work for an exhibition actually I'm doing here next year on the Birbeck, so we will feature her photography. The collection's now gone to the Bodleian Library. She took pictures of Paul Nash while he was there. Eiffel Cahoon, absolutely awesome. And the technique she used, and photography gets forgotten sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think there's others.
But I love to be an artist, particularly I'm waiting to get 80, because once you get over 80, they have the focus in the art world. Because there are quite a few women artists who are really, like Alice Neal, multitude now, who are really recognised as being very powerful voice, yet perhaps in a reasonable rise at the moment, for example. A lot of women artists really have had to wait for quite some time before they got there.
Speaking of women artists, but one say women creative, I think of Iris, she's 102 now.
Oh,
She's a fashion icon. But sometimes you're thinking when you get to turn a certain age, you're like, oh, I'm looking towards retirement now. When you hit a certain age, you're having to realize I'm not close to that. But then when you look at Iris, she just kind of blows everyone out of the world. I'm thinking, I can keep on 102. This is great. We are very driven and passionate, I think, as just creatives and women. And you're thinking, oh, you feel this
But can we differentiate from that then? Can we say that women artists are more driven and passionate about their work than male artists?
I would find it very hard to answer that question because I work at a university with male and female.
Yeah.
It's not, for me, it's not about gender. We shouldn't be judging gender, I can really agree with that. But it's about passion, the drive, the creative practice. Women has had a hard time in history, but we have to learn from it, and we have to set examples of how we move forward with this. So we make us stronger as a creative community and an artist community. We have some great figureheads out there, but we can really build on that and learn from it. Because it's not just about equalities and stuff, not just about females, it's about equalities, especially Black Lives Matter. We really looking at ourselves completely as art citizens of the world, really. So I think people can learn and move forward. And these big debates identify that.
I just think of one example as well that just suddenly struck me. I had to look at my diary just to check, so sorry. Was fortunate to be in Manchester the other week and just to catch the Kasuma exhibition, the installation, I think it was You, Me and Blues. It was absolutely amazing. Probably one of the most exciting things I've been to see all these huge, almost like balloons really. There was a figure, there was a dog, all sorts of things. There was a skill, and she's 95 and has spent most of her life in institutions, it's referred to in Japan. There is actually going to be a show at the Tate of her work coming up, and it's so worth seeing. And it's outside my comfort zone, and I think sometimes it is good to step outside of your comfort zone and be challenged. I mean, it really was the first thing I'd been doing. It was like, wow. It was awesome. I'm still buzzing. about it.
I just saw the Infinity Room as well in London last week, so similar kind of feeling that, it's kind of crossing arts and it's kind of almost dramatic, it's like a kind of performance, but it's kind of, it's taking space in this, this kind of quite interactive experience, which is fantastic.
She's so ahead, she's so ahead of her time as well, right? It's like she's been waiting for the social media age. You can't her work has been actually, she's been working for decades. Yeah, it's simply now that we've really seen her work, I think. Right? I mean, I saw her work a few years ago, I went to see a friend on a research trip, and I had in Canada, I had a bit of the energy to go see a friend in LA, which was really awesome. But this friend booked tickets to go to one of her shows there. It was absolutely amazing. Like, just in this, it was, I was just saying, like, absolutely buzzing afterwards. It's so cool. Like, the whole gallery transformed into something amazing.
Is there a crowd that's actually using her as sort of a symbol?
Yes, there's an animatronic
What struck me as well, and I thought was exciting, was the people who were there. So diverse, really was diverse. From young people, there was a young girl, like knee high. She had this sort of hair, as Juma has. She had a sort of dress on with polka dots, and you could see the pleasure she was getting. And her mother was dressed up similarly, and it was so interesting seeing that room. I just thought, wow, there are so many ways that art can be seen, shown. People can be drawn into it. It's sometimes just finding something that just going to be, that spark. And yes.
I was just thinking about because Joe, you started out in galleries in London, didn't you? And you sort of said that at the time there weren't as many women that were running galleries.
Yeah, that's right. When I did my degree in 1996, I went to work in galleries in London for about 4 years, and 2 of which, I don't think I had any consciousness about anything when I was that age. And I don't know why I ended up in 2 galleries which were run by women. The first one was Gill and Jason Gallery, Gillian's Jason. She was a great role model. She'd been working in top London West End Gallery, doing really well. I think she worked there, I can't remember which gallery, she worked about 10 years, and then she asked to become a director of the gallery, and it was an all-male gallery, and they turned her down, and so that's why she set up Gill and Jason Gallery in her own home in Camden. So I went in as the assistant, and we talked to you on the phones, but interestingly, there were even though she's a female gallerista, there were very few female artists in her gallery. And actually, I think you mentioned because I think she was one of them. Is it Thomas Graham?
Right, yes.
Yes, she was one. Yes. Otherwise, I couldn't really remember anyone else. And sorry, my talk is very subjective actually, and I haven't got quite my memory. So we are going back into the 80s. But so now, I think Gillian has died, and her daughter Ellie and Gillian's granddaughter taken over the gallery, and it's the first women-only artists gallery that
Yes,
there is.
it's women run and women artists that are exhibited. So I think Cecily Brown is on their books. It's a real mix of kind of contemporary, not just British, international.
Just have a quick look at the stairs. It seems a really exciting, dynamic gallery. So that's quite interesting.
And did that kind of encourage you in a way to start your own gallery?
Yes, definitely. That's what I wanted to sort of interject, because I think obviously women, when I was studying, they didn't really feature, women artists didn't really feature in history. And I think as a role model, our women artists, there are very few role models. I think role modeling is really important, and I think the fact that Gillian set up her own gallery in her home affected me, because that's what I did, that's how I started. And so, yeah, being on role models is really important. And I think, I mean, I don't know, I'm not an artist, but I was talking to Frances Hatch this week. And she said, well, she didn't know you were an artist. And when she told her family she wanted to be an artist, it was sort of pat on the head going, yeah, never mind, take it seriously. So these things are important. And of course, Angela Flowers, if anyone knows Angela Flowers, I worked for Flower Seeds. And she was an amazing, incredibly influential gallerist, I think. Quite a scary lady, actually. But you just learn so much. So when I worked with her, there were very few female artists that she represented. I remember Little Hicks. That's about it. I can't really remember anyone else. So today, I've counted up how many artists I have in the gallery, and I swear I do not consciously choose artists based on their sex or whoever they are. I choose artists in the gallery based on beauty, quality, and actually when I get on with them, it's quite a hit.
They've got to be good to work with.
Yeah, it's got to be an easy relationship. So my gallery, I currently have, I think I've written it down, 44 artists, 30 of which are women. What a surprise. So from the 80s, I think a lot of galleries are similar. I think back in the 80s there were very few female artists represented, and now it's a lot more significant. And I did go on Flowers East this morning, and they've got 79 artists, and roughly, I think, 27 women, so it's still a significant increase. So I think it's good times. It's good times for artists, whatever sex they are, but I think it's, thank goodness we're getting some females are getting recognition now.
Because there's also something that psychos, isn't it? You have to have a certain subject that fits in with what contemporary art galleries want to show. In the 50s, referring to Angela Flowers, she had quite a considered profile of the artists that she wanted to show. And I think that still goes now.
I think the trends definitely happen in terms of
I just remember
what kind of work they want.
she was on a holiday now in Ireland, so she did represent all the Irish artists. That's kind of what I remember. But I do think role models is really important.
Because it's what you grow up with and what you see, and I think that kind of segues quite well to Violet talking about kind of education, how, the kind of people that you're around and the kind of artists that you're looking at through your studies or, that sort of thing is so important to kind of cultivating your practice and, knowing that there are women artists throughout history that you can look to or, that really encourages you and your growth. Oh, okay. Oh, time's up. Brilliant. That's great. We're just going to open up the floor in terms of questions, or if anyone has anything that they want to bring out, please go ahead. Yeah, of course.
Can I just make an observation? You're saying about Lucy studying that I did some research, and I found out that Lucy and her sister Edith actually studied at the local art school, and then she went on to study her degree in 1891. So I couldn't trace it back. So she could be a foundation alumnus, maybe, but at the time the college would be Bournemouth West School of Science and Arts. So obviously you local to the area, I just went across the part of the church.
So she went to AMB, but what AMB was a long time ago.
That would be 1890 to 1891.
So I was just going to come back to your commentary on it and hate was
roles and responsibilities that they have in the art world. And I think what's really interesting in terms of the exhibition that you mentioned, sorry, I don't remember his name, anybody's name, the exhibition you said about in Manchester, I think art now in the digital era, in the age of information, is the audience has a voice that it didn't have in Lucy Kemp-Welch's time. So art itself is a lot less prescriptive as a field, as an area, as something that we interact with, as something that we are taught how to appreciate. I think the audience now has a voice and an opinion which is recognised, whether that's through the over-commercialisation of art or just the, as I say, the information age. There's something interesting there that's changing with that role of gatekeeper.
Also an observation,
I think it's coming to you, like, I also feel sorry for young students now because they have an overload of information, but there's so much coming at them that it must be very difficult to pursue your own mind.
but I think within education, I think one of the common threads is about what we talked about, in history and art. They always wanted to go to art school because it was tough for them to get into art school, and obviously it was predominantly male-dominated art school at the time. But yes, there's a lot coming at them in a sense, but there's more opportunities, and I think it's not just a man's world anymore, it's an equal world. Because I think one of the things you were asking me, which I got Al about, is how many graduate opportunities are for women. It shouldn't be about your gender, it should be about opportunities. It's based on talent, who you are, and about doing what you can do. And sometimes people say, as a woman, what's your role? And you're picking up on role models. And I think us all as women, and women in art now, are role models for the next generation. So it's about leading by example. It's not, when you work for organisations, it shouldn't be about what we want and we're doing. It's about the strategy, the mission. We're there to do a job. We're in service to the arts, and we're in service to those young learners and that next generation. So I think if we kind of fight for that cause of art, because it's that visual language and history line first, by championing it and women with that detail, they can bring everybody with you. So we are examples for education. Yes, lots of students, fine art in my day when I studied, it was painting, but now fine art is digital, it's photography. You're all artists in a box, and obviously women in a box, men in a box. But everything's really blurred. I think from the 70s onward, we were all finding our niches and who we are, and where women learned how to wear trousers at one point, we're doing all that. So it's still, there's no walls anymore. So I think even as male, female artists and artists, we are still kind of swimming around. We can be who we want, in a sense. And we're saying about all
I
that.
think one of the things is the fact that women are certainly choice or they don't have a family anymore.
Yeah.
And if they do, they have to have a pretty supportive partner. Because there are a lot of women wanting to speak out and say that if I want to pursue my career, I'm not having any children.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'm Irish, I don't know if people know that. But when I was young, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a fashion designer, an artist and that. And but the expectation in Ireland in those days, not that long ago, pretty long ago, the mark. You were meant to go to school, get a job, and be a great housewife. I could do all that, And I turned around and said, no, I don't want to do that. At 18, I was proposed to, and I'm like, sorry, I go, I'm only 8, no, I think I could be 18 thing last. I said, well, I haven't lived. Secondly, sorry, I don't want to leave. And thirdly, I haven't lived. And my parents went up in arms and said, well, you've been set up for life. And I'm like, but I don't want to be a housewife and everything my mother was, and a fantastic woman. But I wanted to do art. And then my father said, be happy, and that was it. I didn't have to do what I was expected to do. And sometimes you have to kind of saying about marriage, you have to displace yourself just to pursue what you love. And it is.
Yeah, you have to challenge yourself constantly, and I think that ultimately is very good. I think you can tell by the artist who challenges their discipline, challenges their, the subject matter, whatever they want to do.
Yeah. But when you're
And
challenged,
go outside the boundaries, go outside your own expectations.
when you're challenged, you have that struggle, when you're there to share your experience and be a role model or a mentor to push the next generation, give them opportunities that you might be got if you look at yourself, so you're making it safe for them, taking that role on. So I think we are, as a brand, as women, are here to build confidence in the young graduates coming forward, finding out where we're allowed to placements and stuff. And I said, how do I help you? I said, we have to do confidence, because I can talk here. And that's what we're here to do. We have to bring the next generation with us. And we are, you'd be surprised, a lot of people say, yeah, I'm always watching from university, and what's the role in men and females in education? We are becoming a more equal playing field. But remember our history, don't hold us against it as well.
Sorry. I think it's also about, sorry, picking up your point about building alliances, building networks as well. Those are so important. I think certainly in the past, women didn't have access to those same networks of opportunities, which, picking up your points now, fortunately those walls are crumbling. There's still some there that do need kicking down, but there's definitely seeing them crumbling.
I was just going to bring up Emily's quite interesting point about having a family actually, I think this is probably more generally as well, but not just artists, I think actually art professionals as well. I mean, I'm an assistant curator, I'm now in my early 30s, and I would love to have a family, and I'm married, I'm in the right sort of place in possibly my career, but I spent years, doing a PhD, I spent years working and trying to basically get this job. And now I find myself in a position where it's like, do I or don't I have children? Do I carry on with my career or not? And I know people will say, oh, you have everything, you can pursue a career. But actually, when you think about it practically, art world jobs are so poorly paid that it means actually, as a woman, there's not really any point in you returning to work after having kids because childcare is so expensive. So something you have to weigh up.
More childcare opportunities then. Now, in my time, I really have had a very strict schedule of, I have to work between 9 and 2:30 to pick up the children, and then the weekend the Saturdays was my day.
I mean, it's so expensive childcare. It's actually astronomical. I mean, I've got a friend who's a single parent, and she gets it subsidised, which is a single parent, but she's still paying like £900 a month for her child to go into childcare, and it's not even full time. It's actually quite shocking. And I think actually, if you then, that is about women artists, about women professionals, but I think you are limiting women in the art world in terms of curators and people who are actually supposed to be putting women artists forward for the public and educating the public. And if women aren't getting to those top jobs, directors or senior curators or whatever, because they've not had the opportunity to get there because they can't carry on with their work because sort of things like childcare is so expensive. I think it's very difficult. I think, you only have, there's a huge pay gap. There really is,
I think there are some about 2 female directors, take Martin and take Britain and Francis and
Maria Bowser.
There was about 15-20 grand difference between the two sessions. That's shocking. Yeah, so you're
yeah. I mean, Maria
up.
Yeah, I mean, Maria Bowser's an absolute superwoman. I can't remember how many kids she's got, but I saw her talk once and she said, I think she got up at 5 in the morning to do yoga, and then she, took the kids to school and she had a career, and I think it's pretty extraordinary that something like that has got to such an amazing point in her career. She's really happy with it. Yeah,
but also you've got like collectors and stuff that takes her by hand, so kind of working, navigating yourself through that.
I think still at the top level of kind of selling artists, like I was thinking that, women only make up 2% of those kind of top selling artists, and I think the James Savills on the painting floor, I can't remember how many million it was, but the same year Jeff Cooper sold for like, 10 times more in the set. So it just,
There was a recent auction, I think it's Cecily Brown, she's an American artist, and her work, I can't remember the contest, but her work was sold for a much higher price than some of the contemporary sale printers in that which is...
yeah, I think she's up there at the moment, and she's got a big retrospective at the Met.
I don't know, but I do know that she's quite powerful. She's tiny, but she's quite a powerful artist. But again, she did it all right at the right time. Not cynically, but
art is like one of them. It's about being in the right place at the right time, around the right person, or being recommended by the right. Because it is, regardless, it is very recommended. So once you break it in, you're in. But it is right.
And it should be more about access, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, when I sit white women who are sitting here on a panel, I mean, we're not representative at all of, you know, diversity or women working in art or practicing artists necessarily. We all have our own individual experiences. It doesn't mean that anyone else is particularly right on any point, right? It's just one sort of viewpoint. So I think giving people the access to, you know, if they want to see art as a career in whatever form that might be, making sure it's successful for everybody.
Just makes it accessible for everyone. I have a space upstairs in my gallery which I let out to local artists, young, emerging, and I will look at everyone's work because I know how hard it is. Because as a gallery, I get 5 people in a week wanting to be in the gallery, and it's too much. And so that space is a way in to carry on that. It's really important.
Equally in the 90s, I'm sure it still happens, a lot of artists got together for initiative and organised their own exhibitions in, you know, empty shops and, you know, I mean, obviously it's the Young Shells and the best example of that one. But it was quite a vibrant and exciting place to be in, and I think somewhere along the line, I mean, obviously there are things here in Bournemouth which is sort of unexpected, to some premises, but I do miss a little bit of that excitement. And I don't think younger artists really, I don't know, I mean, there's somebody on the age of 25. Review. I'm not sure whether that sort of, maybe even business structures change. Maybe, you know, landlords just so greedy that they don't really want to give up any premises anymore.
I think it's slowly getting there. But just bringing up your point about access, you know, you talk about access to art, access to your guide and access to art, but also us as professionals and talk about it. So we need to be accessible as well for those who want to be curators. And because I remember when I started out, I started off as a professional art practitioner, and then I did an art management course. But while I was a practitioner, I lived in Edinburgh at the time. I went to this gallery and was asked to volunteer. They turned me down 3 times. And then I started to do arts management, and then I got to do a placement, and I said, I don't want to do my placement in that gallery. And I did the education part, and I got in. But prior to that, I just woke up, okay, my maybe not hair, my political clothes, but the days I could dress up. I looked the part of my accent. They knocked me down 3 times. I got into a placement. Then I made a promise to myself, I'm going to knock the door of the gallery. I will give them a placement, regardless. So we have all been knocked back and allowed access and stuff. We kind of, I think, it is tough. But we have to go, okay, well, if it happens to me, I'm going to make sure it goes to the next person.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Women, I think other women.
Finding a new career or back.
Yeah. But then also it's also a choice. I mean, my sister is like a London lawyer, and she's incredibly successful when she goes, you know, it's absolutely fortune. And would I want to do that job? 100% no. Like, I love that she loves her job, but I would not imagine working anything more amazing than working in art. Like, I have the best job in the world. Like, being a curator is fantastic. You do beautiful things all day. Like, the variety of the job is fantastic. Couldn't do anything else.
But when you look at it as a big scale, creativity, technically, without it, you might as well live in space because it's everywhere. You know, you're obviously everything that designs, the reports and everything. Art, it's like air.
It's a necessity, I think, to have those sorts of connections to creativity. And I think online is rich for it. Without it, where would we be in humanity?
Yeah, with a bit of nothing, cars and clothes and bills.
Can I just add to that, given we're seeing so much cutback to the arts, that all of us have a responsibility to lobby for that, because the arts is so badly hit, if we don't lobby for that, if we don't all use our voice to effect, all of us will be for it.
I think, I'm sorry,